In the news this week, international concern for the plight of Iraq's Christians. Calls for fairer pensions in Australia. And the Bible comes to life in Bucharest.
This is InFocus Christian News and Current Affairs.
Hello, it's great to have you with us. We've got a packed program ahead of us. James Standish will be in a bit later to unpack some of the religious freedom issues to do with what's going on in Iraq. And I've got a question for you, Danielle. Hello, by the way.
Hello, Kent.
Is alcohol good for your heart?
Well, not for mine because I don't drink, but I've read something along the lines of red wine being good for your heart.
Yeah, a lot of people seem to think it's true, but Sue Rad, our resident dietitian, says there's been a major new health study that's challenging that perception.
Yeah.
There you go.
It's very interesting for sure, Kent. But I'll tell you what, if you guys are a bit of an 80s tragic like me, you might be getting a bit excited about our special guest today, Peter Cousens.
Yes. If you were a fan of Sons and Daughters back in the day, or even A Country Practice or The Sullivans, you'll be interested to see Peter Cousens, who's in to talk about his directorial debut, a movie with Cuba Gooding Jr., Danielle, about the transatlantic slave trade and the Underground Railroad.
Yeah, that's right. And there's an interesting twist about the Underground Railroad in today's news, Kent.
OK, we'll look out for it. All yours.
Thank you. Major religious organisations have expressed their concerns about the atrocities committed against Iraqi Christians and other minority groups by the so-called Islamic State terrorist group. The extremists have now taken over Karakosh, Iraq's largest Christian majority town, as well as surrounding areas in the country's north, sparking another mass exodus of about 250,000 people in just 72 hours. The United Nations says Christians, the Yazidi ethno-religious group and Iraq's Turkmen minority have all been targeted. The UN has received reports of women being made sex slaves and child soldiers being recruited. Religious leaders, including the Archbishop of Canterbury, the Pope and the head of the World Evangelical Alliance, have all spoken out publicly against the violence. The head of the Seventh-day Adventist Church, Dr. Ted Wilson, said the targeting of religious minorities is particularly concerning and that the church will do its best to assist people who have fled their homes. Meanwhile, Assyrian Christians around the world commemorated their annual Martyrs' Day, many of them not realising that while they paused to pray, fellow believers in their Nineveh homeland were experiencing a fresh wave of violence. Islamist terrorists have also struck again in northern Nigeria, where it's believed around 100 people were killed in the predominantly Christian town of Gwoza and surrounding villages. According to Morning Star News, threats were received from the Boko Haram extremist group in the weeks before the attack, in which bombs, guns and knives were used to kill men, women and children. Houses, shops and churches were also burned in the attack, which prompted about 260,000 people to flee the area, many over the border into neighbouring Cameroon. And still in Africa, the Society of Friends, better known as the Quakers, has begun setting up what they call the new Underground Railroad to help gay, lesbian and transgender people escape Uganda's tough anti-homosexual laws. According to their website, the coalition relies on local organisations and individuals in Uganda and is supported by a Quaker group south of Seattle in the USA. The Society of Friends was heavily involved in America's original Underground Railroad, a 19th century network of secret routes for escaped slaves. The modern-day Friends say that so far they've helped more than 270 Ugandans escape to countries where they won't be prosecuted for their sexual behaviours. In the wake of what's been widely criticised as a punishing budget for Australia's poor, Christian social services are renewing their calls for a fairer regime of welfare payments. According to The Age, the Salvation Army and Anglicare have now gone public in their support of a Catholic social services plan for an independent body that would set the levels of pensions and other social security benefits. The welfare agencies say the nation's poor are victims of political agendas and should instead be supported according to their need by payments that increase along with economic indicators. The Australian government is currently reviewing the nation's system of pensions, benefits and allowances, but has so far rejected any suggestion that it should allow an independent agency to set their levels. Guatemala's President, Otto Perez Molina, has welcomed an Adventist initiative that will encourage holistic health and well-being for the Latin American nation. The President spoke at a regional youth congress of nearly 6,000 young Adventists from around Central America and the Caribbean. He announced that the government has adopted and will soon be launching the church's I Want to Live Healthy project. Both the government and church leaders encouraged the young people present to be positive agents for change in their homes, churches, universities and workplaces. Young people in Solomon Islands have seen firsthand the impact of the Bible on them and their peers. At a recent nationwide youth event in the capital, Honiara, 97 people were baptised as stories were shared about the impact of the Bibles and Discipleship Training program provided through the World Changes Adventist Youth Ministry initiative.
In the last 3 years, we have distributed over 200,000 World Changer Bibles throughout the South Pacific. And so we're really excited about that. It's this Bible right here. And young people, they come, they get trained, they can use this Bible, they can share their faith with others. And yeah, they feel ready and equipped to do that. Anybody can do it. It's simple.
In Romania, tens of thousands of people have visited a recreated biblical village set in one of the largest parks in the capital city of Bucharest. Some 500 volunteers staffed the village. Visitors learned about biblical principles, sampled food and registered for free healthy cooking classes. The Bible Village outreach was supported by the Seventh-day Adventist Church. Making the Bible come alive also seems to be the aim of a Californian book designer, Adam Green. His idea for a Bible without chapter or verse numbers has attracted more than $1.4 million from online supporters. The Bibliotheca project encourages readers to approach the Bible as a book to be read as a coherent whole, rather than something to be dismembered and examined verse by verse. The layout and materials used will make the 4-volume Bible look less like an encyclopedia with multiple columns, subheadings and footnotes, and more like a hardcover novel. Nearly 15,000 people around the world have pledged $1,000 each to get their copy of the Bible and to fund its production. And that's it for the news this week. Kent.
Thanks, Danielle. But a Bible for $1,000 in 4 volumes. I don't know. I'm not sure about that.
Yeah, I suppose it could be seen as a lot of money, Kent, but if you compare the cost of, them years ago being handwritten.
Yes, yeah, those handwritten manuscripts.
And the lives
probably
lost.
A couple of years' wages or something. We'll take a short break now. I'll be back in a sec with James Standish.
Planning your future can be a daunting task. What you want to do, who you want to be, and the road ahead can often be unpredictable. No one really knows what the future holds. Avondale. It's education designed for life.
Hello, welcome back, and it's great to have James Standish with us again. How are you, James?
I'm doing well, Kent.
Now, James, we heard in the news earlier the dreadful situation in Iraq right now with what was it, 750,000 people leaving the Kirkuk area in a period of like 4 days, 72 hours.
There's just been a tremendous pressure on religious minorities as ISIS, the Islamic extremist group, has come through northern Iraq. This is an area where a lot of Christians live, a lot of Yazidis, some other minorities like the Turkmen people as well. Now, what you should know about this, Ken, is this is not a surprise. Yes, it's headlines today. This is not a surprise. When I worked for the U.S. Commission on International Religious Freedom, I was executive director there, as you know. Back in 2008, we did a report on this, and I'd invite our viewers to go and look at that report. Just look at U.S. Commission on International Religious Freedom, look up the report on Iraq, and what you'll see is all the precursors for this happening was well documented, as well as steps that could be taken to prevent this crisis.
With what could have been done to
Well,
avert this?
there was a lot of things that had to happen, including constitutional and legal protections and integration into society, also security protections that were necessary. Most of those steps were not done. We went up to Capitol Hill, we went to the White House, we talked to the national security advisors there in the White House, and there was a lot of interest in Iraq, but most of the interest at the time was getting out.
Yeah.
And people felt like, well, you know, we've done our bit, people have died, it's time to get out of this place. The problem is that wise heads on both the Democratic and the Republican side, before we went into Iraq, that is we, the coalition of the willing, that's America and Australia and the UK and so forth, before we went in there, was saying, if you go into Iraq, this is a very complicated ethnic and ethnic soup, and once you crack it open, anything's possible.
Yeah.
We're now seeing the anything is possible, and it is really terrifying. The Christian...
It's pretty worst case scenario stuff.
This is a worst case scenario.
Yeah.
Christian population, Christians were once 8%. 8% of Iraq. Tariq Aziz, who we remember as foreign minister of Iraq during Saddam Hussein, I'm not suggesting that was a great period by any means.
Sure.
He was a Christian, though. Well, and that was the way that they integrated back then. Well, the population has gone from 8%.
It's about 1.5 million.
1.5 million or so. Now they're down to about 450,000.
Wow.
And so just imagine, just those few years, we've lost over 1 million Christians from Iraq. And of course, we're at a point where the ability of Christianity to survive in Iraq is really a big question mark. In fact, I'm rather pessimistic myself.
So James, you say the emphasis has been on, you know, foreign troops getting out of Iraq, but now we've got, you know, airstrikes, US airstrikes.
That's right.
Is more military action the answer? Just briefly before we finish.
Well, we're in a complete mess. Probably military intervention is necessary because how else do you stop the genocide that's going on? Our only hope now is to get the rest of the Christians out and find them places to live, like Australia.
Yeah, if they need help, we should be there for them.
You're right.
Okay, thanks, James.
Pleasure.
We'll go now to Food in Focus with James Toogood.
Look, if I was to tell you that this glass of pure mineral water contained asbestos, do you really think I would be drinking it? Of course not. And yet the Cancer Council of Australia has released a position statement exploring how one of the most popular beverages contributes to... Surad, thank you so much for coming today. Every time I learn something from you. The position statement revealed what?
Well, a position statement was on alcohol and cancer.
Alcohol.
And we now know that alcohol is a proven cause of cancer. Any amount of alcohol will increase your risk of cancer.
This most
but the
popular
more you
of
drink,
Aussie beverages.
the worse it is. Yeah, so there is no doubt. In fact, we've known for 20 years that alcoholic beverages cause cancer. They are graded as grade 1 carcinogen, meaning proven in humans, no doubt there.
But you hardly ever read about this in the newspaper.
Yeah, very few people know. And for example, the evidence is convincing for cancers such as breast cancer.
Okay.
Few women know that. For cancers such as... Throat, you know, sort of the neck area, pharynx, larynx, the esophagus, that's the food pipe. It's proven in men for colon cancer. It's also probable in women for colon cancer and probable in terms of liver cancer. So lots of cancers are linked with alcohol use. And so this position statement has really scoured the evidence to make some clear recommendations.
Maybe we don't hear about it often because it's not really a party conversation topic, is it?
No, and if you look at people who both smoke and who drink, it's even worse. The situation gets worse. Well, for example, if you're just a drinker and you drink regularly, you have an increased risk of the sort of the mouth and throat cancers by about 6 or 7 times. If you're a smoker, the same sort of thing applies. But if you both drink and smoke heavily, you have a 35 times increased risk of cancer. So there's some sort of synergy.
Together.
Yeah, they work together. Two baddies working together.
And this same principle applies to the other risk factors of cancer, I guess, does it? So
well, it can
if
drive...
you're susceptible to colon cancer, alcohol will multiply
so for
it even
example,
more.
alcohol helps you gain weight very rapidly.
Okay.
Gaining weight rapidly in obesity is strongly linked to cancer. That's one of the mechanisms through which it works. And there are several others for which we know.
what is reported in the paper, and you do see this often, you've probably heard about it yourself, and that is, isn't it true that red wine is good for your heart?
Well, actually, the Cancer Council Australia says that the existing evidence does not justify promoting any alcoholic beverages to reduce the risk of heart disease, even in small amounts. And it basically says that the evidence is very weak, and that in the past a lot of the studies have misclassified former drinkers into teetotaler groups. And, you know, when you're a former drinker, if you've already got some ill effects of alcohol, you bring them along with you. And there's also what they call confounding, some residual confounding, meaning that you might have just had a healthy lifestyle and that's helped to keep you alive and healthier, but you might have been drinking alcohol and that might still be causing an effect.
These scientific bodies are not religious wowser groups, are they?
No, they're not. So even the National Heart Foundation, or Heart Foundation as they're called these days, does not recommend taking up drinking to reduce your risk of heart disease. Neither does the World Health Organisation. Well, they've got vested interests. Many people, even some in the medical profession, dare I say, you know, own vineyards. So they need to sell wine. But the evidence does not justify, as the Cancer Council Australia says, any need to promote alcohol to reduce your risk of heart disease. There's lots of other ways to reduce your risk, such as a good diet, exercising, stress control, you know, drinking water. All of these other ways can lower your risk without raising your risk.
But there's still one burning question. Everybody wants to know how much. What are the guidelines for alcohol?
For cancer prevention, none. They're basically saying to avoid it, preferably to avoid it. And if you need to drink, the National Health and Medical Research Council of Australia says no more than 2 standard drinks on any given day. And 2 standard drinks is not very much. It's extremely small. But if you really want to be healthy, as I mentioned, there's lots of other ways to be healthy without having to take something that may raise your risk of cancer.
Pure, clean, asbestos-free and alcohol-free water. It's still good for you, isn't
and
it,
good
Sue?
for the heart.
Yeah, I'm going to enjoy it now. Cheers, guys. Nicely twisted.
Want to know the answers to your deepest questions? Log on to discoverycourses.com. 15 totally free courses discuss spirituality, lifestyle, archaeology and health. Make your personal discovery today at discoverycourses.com.
Hi, welcome back. Well, you may remember him from Country Practice, or maybe Sons and Daughters, or even McLeod's Daughters. We've got in the studio today Mr. Peter Cousens. How are you, Peter?
Good, Ken. Really good to be here. It's a very bright set.
Yes, not like those moody sort of drama sets that you're used to, perhaps.
No, or even the sets back in the 80s.
So you're a bit of an Australian television legend, then, are you? How does that feel?
Look, it makes me feel very old, because it was some time ago that I was on television a lot, and that was sort of during the 1980s. So it was sort of a halcyon days of television, actually, with lots of series like Cop Shop and Sons and Daughters and The Sullivans. And
there was a lot of local drama, wasn't there? Yeah, and The Sullivans as well. That was very long running. We were kind of
mentored as young actors too by older actors. It wasn't such a youth-orientated soaps and things. They were much more eclectic casting and generational. So I remember great training ground.
I remember sitting down with the whole family, you know, watching Country Practice, and you had some very old characters there and some young characters, and it was a good family soap.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's the focus has kind of gone in a slightly different way these days.
So far as acting is concerned, you're a bit of an old hand, but as far as...
An old ham or an old
ham? Well, I'll leave that up to you, Peter.
Probably an old ham.
But so far as directing is concerned, you're looking at your debut with this new movie, Freedom. How was that? Directing?
Well, thrilling, you know, and to come across from another performing arts discipline was very exciting to do. And luckily, I mean, this film was made in America. It was a great opportunity and a great and very respectful time from them in terms of, because I was obviously pretty challenged, I expect, by the prospect of doing something like this. But I discovered a whole lot of things I didn't know I knew.
Yeah, such as?
And well, just dealing with the technical side of film. Sure. If you haven't done it from a particular side of the camera, it could be daunting. But I actually realised that a whole lot of stuff that I sort of either instinctively knew or had absorbed over the years. And so much of being a director on a film is really sharing a vision and managing and leading people towards a particular goal.
So the movie's called Freedom. And it focuses on John Newton, who we saw in the movie Amazing Grace as an old man. You know, that beautiful moment where he's, I was blind, but now I see. And actually, he is blind at that stage in his life. But they really stole the title that your movie should have had, because your movie is actually more about John Newton than theirs. That's one of the main stories there.
Look, a third of the film is about John Newton, and we use that story as a way of I expect it's part of the inspiration of our main story, which is a family of slaves escaping with the help of the Underground Railroad, which was a secret network of people who guided these slaves to freedom in Canada. And on the way, a story is told about John Newton and his moment of catharsis in the middle of the Atlantic.
He was a slave trader himself at one stage, but was converted. Yeah,
and we see his conscience being totally ripped apart as he deals with what was acceptable by Christians, by everyone. The slave trade was something which was just part of the way things were, part of the way the economy worked. So. Yeah. And so we see that, and we also see and understand the legacy, which was Amazing Grace, the song, and that song plays a part, I expect, in the catharsis of our leading slave who's escaping, who's played
Samuel.
Samuel, who's played by Cuba Gooding Jr.
Cuba Gooding Jr. I want to ask you about Cuba Gooding Jr., but let's, just for our audience's sake, rather than talking about the film, let's have a look at a little bit of the trailer, so you can get a feel for what it's about.
This story, although set in the past, is about the future, where I know freedom is.
Freedom, Samuel. God willing.
Sammy, you have to trust.
They're gonna run us down, Nessa. They're gonna beat us again. They're gonna put the collar to us again. Faith.
I'm tossed in this wide world.
I don't want you to go.
Mary, I'm simply the captain of Barton's ship. I don't own it, nor the cargo.
No hope have I for tomorrow.
They're taking food! What is he saying?
He wants his freedom.
Captain Newton, so like you, Samuel, confronted by his past. A soul without a compass.
I am a man. Am I not your brother?
Well, that just looks fascinating, Peter. How did you, a first-time director from Australia, manage to hook up with Cuba Gooding Jr.?
Well, we asked him to be in the show. It's just a matter of, ask and ye shall receive, as they say. Okay. So, he had a look at the script and he liked it. He had some time. It was fortuitous, really.
He's done a lot of real-life drama, hasn't he? I think, the Ben Carson story, Gifted Hands. I saw one the other day, Radio.
Yep.
The Navy Diver, I can't remember what that's called off the top of my head, but he's done a lot of sort of real-life, human dramas, and really powerful. So he was excited about the script, was he?
Yes, he was, and he's very committed to the idea of the story, and it was it's an interesting story. We have these two time periods, and we have tall ships and trains, and it's a chase film as well. We have baddies chasing the slaves on horseback, and a few gunfights and all that sort of stuff, as well as we have 11 songs. In the film, gospel, bluegrass, and of course Amazing Grace,
and hymns,
and a couple of hymns, So it's a very it's an interestingly constructed film, but also it's powerful, I think, because of the nature of the music inside it, which is kind of holds the soul of it together. I mean, music was used so much as a device for hope. Particularly amongst the slaves, and we used that device in the film.
Wow. So would you see this as a spiritual film? Does it have a spiritual message?
Oh, most certainly. And it's also about forgiveness. Like freedom really is determined or dependent upon one's ability to forgive, as well as freedom being all those other things, and it means many different things, obviously, to different people. But it's certainly a film which faith-based and Christians will have no trouble taking their secular friends to. It doesn't sermonise or evangelise. The parable within it is obvious, but at the same time, it's very accessible to anyone in the general public.
Yeah, okay. So you've tried pretty hard not to, I guess, have this obvious sort of evangelistic moment where, you know, well, now's the big conversion. Or...
Yeah, well, no, I mean, and it's sort of like, you know, why preach to the converted? You know, so, but at the same time, it does affirm, you know, the concept of hope, and that we are with, you know, can overcome.
What sort of response have you got so far? Like, because you've been doing some preview screenings and, you know, test screenings and things.
Yeah, I mean, I've been around the country doing some pre-screenings, and it's been really wonderfully warm, wonderfully positive. People are very moved by the film. It also has some social justice issues within it. The film obviously tells a story about slavery, but
which is still an issue today, sadly.
Which is still an issue today, and we, at the very end of the film, and I won't give it away, but there is a very powerful connection that we make as filmmakers to the issue of human trafficking, and we hope that that will help to bring a greater awareness. And we've combined with a couple of major human trafficking organisations like A21 and Destiny Rescue in particular, and others who are really getting behind the film because they see its power to change people.
Okay, so when should we see this film in cinemas? In Australia and overseas?
Yeah, it's having its world premiere in Australia, which is unusual, from the 21st of August, and we encourage all of you who want to see the film to go on that first weekend.
And in elsewhere around the world?
Elsewhere around the world following, yeah. We'll go to America and Europe and South America.
Thanks so much for your time today, Peter.
Thanks, Kent. Real pleasure.
And we'll be back straight after the break.
Signs of the Times, a magazine for a world on the brink. And this month in Signs, best-selling author Max Lucado on facing life's challenges. Why should human beings have more rights than animals? There's danger in staying permanently connected to the digital world. 10 fun and healthy activities your family can enjoy together. All in this month's Signs of the Times. Subscribe to Signs today and change your life.
Hello. Well, I guess that just about wraps it up for us, Danielle.
It does indeed, Kent. Now, what was the date, just before we go, for Peter Cousens' film again?
I think it is August the 21st, so that's just a couple of days away at selected Hoyts and event cinemas. It'll be interesting to see, you know, what sort of reaction it gets from Christian audiences and, I guess, mainstream audiences as well.
Yeah, absolutely, Kent. Well, thanks for your company this week. We'll see you next time on Record in Focus.
Don't forget to check the website. God bless.